Likewise, if we look at the United States, which is the middle chart here. Now, President Andrew Jackson, who had a particular hatred of debt, did seek to pay off the debt which the United States had incurred in the War of Independence, in the War of 1812 against the British, and indeed in the second part of his 8-year term in office, he actually reduced America's federal debt to less than $40,000 US, sort of amount that maybe you or I could pay off on our credit card nowadays. But even before Jackson's term of office came to an end, the Panic of 1837 hit, and the US government found itself, although they didn't do fiscal policy in the way that we do in the modern era, running budget deficits. And you can see from the middle chart that ever since then, US public debt has really ever only gone in one direction. So in other words, there actually hasn't been a day since the US became independent from Britain in 1776 when the US hasn't had at least some public debt. And that's actually true of Australia as well. I mean, this chart here puts Australia's gross debt into historical perspective, and you can see that while public debt has certainly risen a lot over the last few years since the onset of the financial crisis, the level of gross debt that the Australian government has is a lot less than the debt which governments from Edmund Barton's at the time of Federation in 1901 to the final years of Sir Robert Menzies in the early 1960s were perfectly comfortable of living with. So there's nothing about history that tells us there is any obligation on the part of governments to repay any of the public debt they might have racked up at some point in the future. As with the households, the critical question is not how big the debt is, but rather what it's been used for and whether it can be serviced, that is, whether the interest on it can be paid, without requiring either crippling levels of taxation on the one hand, or unsustainable and undesirable and unfair, from a social point of view, cuts in other areas of government spending.